Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, let your thoughts drift gently as we take you on a peaceful journey. This is a space for calm, for quiet moments, and for the kind of stories that settle your heart and slow your breath. Make yourself comfortable, close your eyes if you wish, and allow the world to soften around you. Now, let's begin with tonight's story. Today's story is titled, The Keeper of Hollow. It began, as most changes do, not with a thunderclap, but with a whisper. Somewhere between dusk and nightfall, Eloan drifted from the tangled cords of city life, disconnected, restless, and quietly yearning. It wasn't something she had planned, nor something she had even voiced aloud. It had started in her dreams, soft visions of a place she didn't recognize but deeply longed for. A field kissed by mist, a lantern swinging on an old porch, and the scent of pinewood mixed with lavender. Every time she awoke, the details faded, like water slipping through her fingers, but the feeling remained. One evening, after another weary day filled with static and screen glare, Eloan stood by her apartment window. Neon lights blinked below in chaotic sync, and the distant hum of sirens reminded her that the city never slept, but she desperately needed to. Her heart beat with the subtle insistence of something about to break free. She needed to leave. Not just for a vacation or a change of pace, but something deeper. A realignment. A return, even if she wasn't sure to where. The next morning, she packed lightly. Not just her clothes, but pieces of her past, her late grandmother's locket, a sketchbook filled with half-finished drawings, a book of old folk tales she loved as a child. She didn't tell anyone. There was no dramatic farewell or reason to explain. Only a name she'd read once in a dream and scribbled into her notebook, Greydown Hollow. It wasn't on any modern map. GPS showed nothing. But somehow, her car knew where to go. As she drove out of the city, the buildings gave way to rolling hills and sleepy farmland. Telephone wires thinned, the air grew clearer, and the radio static turned into silence. Trees leaned in closer as the road narrowed, golden leaves swirling around her windshield like tiny spells being cast. Somewhere along the highway, Eloan felt something change inside her, as if the world she left behind had fallen away, and the one ahead was not quite real, but also not quite imagined. She drove for hours without tiring, not because of the coffee she sipped, but because of the strange energy in the air. It wasn't caffeine, it was curiosity pulling her forward, deeper into the winding, unmarked roads that seemed to whisper her name in the wind. Eventually, the asphalt became cobblestone. Her tires crunched softly over aged stone as the forest thinned. Fog curled gently at the edge of the road like a watchful creature. And then, as if from nowhere, she saw it. A wooden signpost, carved by hand, crooked but standing tall. Greydown Hollow, where time sleeps. The words sent a chill down her spine, not of fear, but of recognition. She knew this place. Or maybe, this place knew her. Eloan stopped the car and stepped out. The air was cooler here, touched with something older than memory. The scent of damp earth mixed with blooming elderflowers. Her boots sank slightly into the mossy ground, and for a moment, she just stood there, listening. No cars. No voices. No buzzing. Only the soft rush of wind through leaves and the distant, soothing hoot of an owl. She followed a narrow path off the roadside, not sure why, only that she must. It wound between old oak trees, each one gnarled and thick like guardians of forgotten stories. Fallen branches created arches above her, and tiny blue flowers bloomed along the edge of the trail. The path led to a hill, and at its crest, Eloan caught her breath. Nestled in a sunken glade, surrounded by a half-circle of willow trees, stood a cottage unlike any she had seen. Its roof was shingled with mossy slate, its walls made of river stone, glowing with warmth from within. A chimney puffed gentle spirals of smoke into the sky, and the front porch creaked faintly, as if swaying with anticipation. Lanterns hung from low wooden beams, flickering softly with golden light though it was only afternoon. Everything about the house whispered, "Welcome home." Eloan descended the hill slowly, her hands brushing wild thyme as she walked. The closer she came, the more her heart beat in a strange rhythm, not panic, but a curious syncopation, as though remembering an old song she hadn't heard in years. At the foot of the porch steps, she hesitated. Not out of fear but reverence. There was a small plaque nailed beside the door, carved with the same careful script as the road sign. The Hollow House. She reached for the doorknob. Before her fingers touched the brass handle, the door creaked open just a sliver. A gentle draft sighed outward, carrying with it the aroma of cedarwood, cinnamon, and fresh-baked bread. And then, from inside, a voice. Warm. Soft. Neither old nor young. "You made it, Eloan. Come in. We've been waiting." She froze. How did they know her name? But as she stepped forward, she realized, this wasn't just a place to find rest. This was a place to remember who she truly was. And so she entered. The moment Eloan crossed the threshold of the Hollow House, it was as if time exhaled. The air inside was dense with the perfume of stories long told, memories unspoken, and a peace so deep it made her knees slightly weak. The floor beneath her boots was made of polished elm wood, dark with age, but smooth as still water. The walls were lined with shelves holding odd trinkets, ceramic owls, glass orbs, hand-bound books, dried herbs hanging in braided bunches. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, radiating warmth that reached not just her skin, but something further in, something curled up and long neglected. She turned slowly in place, absorbing it all. A small cat, jet black with one white paw, padded silently across the room and stared at her with mismatched eyes, one amber, one blue. Without blinking, it jumped onto a velvet chair and settled, as if its inspection was complete. Eloan couldn't help but smile. On the wooden table near the hearth lay a tray of still warm scones, a silver teapot, and 2 cups both filled. 2 cups, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Someone knew I was coming. Indeed, It felt less like entering a stranger's home and more like returning to a place that had quietly kept a space for her all these years. Then came the voice again. This time closer, but still unseen. Not all journeys are made with maps, Eloan. Some are remembered through the soul. A tall woman stepped from a doorway Eloan hadn't noticed before. She was neither young nor old. Her agelessness shimmered in the glow of the firelight. Her eyes were the color of dusk, her hair a flowing cascade of silver and moonlight. Around her neck hung a small silver key. "My name is Narrated," she said simply, "and you've come home to Greydown Hollow." Eloan opened her mouth, but words caught behind her breath. Narrated smiled knowingly and gestured to the table. "Sit. Let the hollow speak." As they sat and sipped the tea, sweet, earthy, with a note of honey and rosemary, Eloan began to feel her thoughts uncoil. She wasn't sure how long they sat there in silence, but in that span, she began to remember fragments of dreams she'd had as a child. A willow tree with a door in its trunk. A candle that burned without melting. A place called the Hollow she used to draw in her sketchbooks and swear she'd visit one day until the world taught her to forget. Narrated eventually spoke again. "This place remembers those who are searching. It doesn't reveal itself to everyone. Only those who hear the call and still choose to follow." Eloan nodded slowly. "I think I've been hearing it all my life." "Yes. And now that you've returned, the hollow will reveal itself to you piece by piece." Narrated rose from her chair and retrieved a small leather journal from a high shelf. She placed it in Eloan's hands. "It belonged to someone like you," Narrated said. "A seeker. The pages are blank for now. But the hollow has a way of filling things in when you're ready." Eloan traced her fingers over the worn leather cover. It was warm. "I don't understand. Is this place real? Is this a dream?" Narrated's eyes sparkled, the firelight catching on her silver lashes. "It's both. It's neither. The hollow exists where the boundaries between memory, magic, and meaning begin to blur. What matters is not whether it's real but that you're here. And that you listen." A faint chime echoed from somewhere deeper in the house. Narrated tilted her head and smiled. "The garden is waiting." Eloan blinked. "Garden?" "Every soul that comes here is drawn to its own beginning. Yours is in the garden." She rose to her feet. Her heart beat with that curious rhythm again, ancient and new. Narrated opened a second door, this one leading out the back of the house. A winding stone path curled out from beneath a moss-covered archway. Ferns lined its edges. Vines crisscrossed the top like natural lace. The air was cooler out here. Fresher. More alive. As Eloan stepped onto the first stone, the wind picked up and stirred the leaves overhead into a soft hush like the rustling pages of 1,000 books. The road ahead twisted gently, beckoning. She walked forward, and the hollow walked with her. The stone path that curled from the back of the hollow house felt less like something made by human hands and more like something grown. Each stone was covered in soft moss, edges rounded by time, and arranged with such casual elegance that it felt inevitable, like water finding its riverbed. Eloan followed the curve of the path through the archway, her footsteps slow, almost reverent. As she passed beneath the wooden arbor twined with blooming night jasmine, she could feel the air itself change. Not colder, not warmer, just deeper. Beyond the arch, the world widened. The garden opened before her like a breath held for a century and finally released. It wasn't merely a garden, it was a realm of stillness made alive. Rows of plants stretched in elegant disorder, each corner a vignette of nature's quiet theater. Lavender and thyme clustered in gentle spirals near the steps. Beyond them, soft grass undulated in waves that shimmered under the waning afternoon light. Somewhere far back, a silver pond reflected the sky, while dragonflies traced invisible sigils across its surface. And there was sound, but not the kind that demanded attention. The kind that slipped into you and rewrote the rhythm of your heartbeat. Wind in the leaves. Distant birdsong. The occasional hum of bees threading between blossoms. It was like music without instruments. Eloan felt her shoulders fall, her spine uncoil. She hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding herself until that very moment. The path continued, guiding her gently between raised garden beds brimming with herbs and vegetables. Vines crawled up trellises like curious children, sunflowers turned their golden faces toward her, and roses, wild and unapologetic, spilled their scent into the air without restraint. And still, no fences. No boundaries. She reached a section of the garden that felt somehow older. The stone pathway grew narrower, bordered now by ferns as tall as her chest. A willow tree rose at the heart of this hidden grove, its branches sweeping the earth like a curtain, its trunk wide and hollowed with age. At the base of the tree sat a stone bench worn smooth, as if countless visitors had come before her and rested in this very spot. She sat down. Everything stilled. Eloan placed the leather journal Married had given her on her lap. She hadn't opened it yet. She wasn't sure why, but here, now, under the ancient willow, it felt like the right time. When she flipped open the cover, something strange happened. There was handwriting inside. She hadn't written anything. The ink was delicate, dusky brown, and slanted like it belonged to someone from another era. But the message was written to her. To remember is to reclaim. Let the garden show you what was never lost. Below the message was a sketch, intricate and alive with detail. It showed the very garden she sat in now. The willow tree, the bench, and a door etched into the tree trunk behind her. Eloan blinked. She turned slowly. There was no door. Only bark and age. But as she stood and stepped closer, brushing aside one low-hanging branch, the outline appeared. Faint at first, then clearer as her fingers traced it. The bark itself responded, softening under her touch, and then without sound it opened. Just a crack. Behind it was darkness, and a spiral staircase leading down. She looked back toward the cottage, its roof just visible between hedges and hanging vines, but something within her said she wasn't in danger. She was being invited. She left the journal on the bench and stepped into the hollow. The staircase was stone, cool under her fingers, spiraling down in gentle arcs. Along the walls, luminous mushrooms glowed with bioluminescent light, casting a serene greenish hue. The scent changed here, earthy, damp, full of secrets and seed. At the bottom of the staircase, the air opened again. A subterranean greenhouse, lit from above by a single, circular skylight, the roots of the willow framing the glass like a crown. Shelves upon shelves of plants she didn't recognize reached toward her, their petals trembling gently, though there was no wind. Vials of amber liquid, crystals, and pressed herbs lined a nearby table. A woven tapestry hung from the far wall, depicting what looked like Eloan. Not her face exactly, but the outline of a woman with a journal, standing beneath a willow, holding a key made of moonlight. Eloan stepped closer. The threads shimmered as if alive. Something warm pulsed in her palm. She looked down. There somehow in her hand was the key Merid wore around her neck. Except now it was hers. A door at the end of the greenhouse opened not outward, but inward, like water parting. And behind it, light. Not blinding. Soft. Gold. Calling. She stepped through. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, she found herself back in the garden, except it was dusk now. Fireflies dotted the air, and the world had shifted minutely. Softer. Quieter. Wiser. Eloan turned. The willow had closed. The journal was back in her hands. She opened it. The page had changed. Now it read, "The hollow remembers. The garden listens. You are not just visiting, you are returning." And beneath those words, a new path was drawn leading deeper into the garden. The next chapter was waiting. The garden did not sleep. Even as the sun dipped lower behind the hills and dusk brushed the treetops with shadow, the hollow's garden stirred with a quiet energy, as if nightfall only awakened a different kind of life. Eloan stood once more before the willow, its great roots winding like ancient fingers into the earth. The door that had appeared earlier was gone now, sealed seamlessly back into bark. And yet, she no longer needed it, for her hands held the journal, and its pages had changed again. New ink had bloomed across the parchment, forming not just words, but a hand-drawn map, delicate and flowing, with soft lines that curved like the trails of wind. At the center was the hollow house. Surrounding it, paths etched in soft brown ink fanned outward into the garden, each one marked with a symbol, a spiral, a lantern, a star, a teardrop. Eloan brushed her fingers across the spiral. The page warmed beneath her touch, and the symbol pulsed faintly. She looked up. At her feet, a thin path had appeared, winding gently through a patch of foxgloves. It hadn't been there earlier. The stonework was similar to the path she'd walked before, but older, worn deeper by time or perhaps memory. She followed it, the journal tucked under her arm, heart steady. The path curved past a wall of lavender bushes, the scent wrapping around her like a familiar lullaby. Fireflies glowed softly, blinking in rhythm, almost forming shapes. One hovered near her cheek, then zipped forward, as if leading the way. She followed. Around a bend, the path forked. To the left, the spiral symbol reappeared, carved delicately into a stone marker. To the right, a circle made of petals, perhaps another choice for later. But tonight, the spiral called. The spiral path led to a circular glade surrounded by tall hedges, open only to the sky. In the center stood a small round platform made of polished stone. Eloan stepped forward, noting the way the stars above seemed to spiral too, mirrored perfectly in the pattern etched into the platform. She stood at the center. The moment her feet touched the middle, a breeze stirred though the trees were still. The air shimmered. And suddenly, she wasn't standing in the glade anymore. She was 10 years old, sitting beneath a birch tree in her grandmother's backyard. The scent of mint and sun-warmed apples filled her nose. Her grandmother sat nearby in a woven chair, reading from a book of lullabies. Eloan remembered this moment, the feeling of her toes buried in the dirt, the way the wind tugged at the hem of her dress. But it wasn't just memory. It was happening. She tried to speak, to ask her grandmother something she'd always wished she had. But her voice wouldn't form. She could only observe, a silent witness to a moment of joy lost to time. And then, just as gently, the memory dissolved, like dew under morning sun. She was back in the glade. Her hand gripped the journal tightly. A new page had filled itself. The spiral path remembers joy. In joy, we root ourselves. What once was treasured is never truly gone. Tears stung her eyes, but they were not from sorrow. They were from the ache of beauty. Of remembering something so pure that it left an echo in your bones. She followed the path back to the fork, where now the second trail, the one marked by petals, had begun to glow faintly. Curious, Eloan turned down this one. It led her to a place that looked like a wild rose sanctuary. Vines formed natural arches, and the roses here were unlike any she had seen, deep blue, almost violet, their petals edged with silver. The scent was soft but sad, like the final note of a lullaby. In the center of the clearing was a small reflecting pool. Eloan peered into it and saw not her own face, but herself at 17, sitting at the back of a train, watching a city disappear behind her. That was the day she left home for good, after the funeral. After she had sworn never to cry again. The scene unfolded quietly. No sound. No drama. Just the weight of leaving everything behind, stuffed into a backpack and a too tight heart. She knelt beside the pool and touched the water. The vision faded. And in her journal, another page filled in. The petal path remembers loss. In loss, we bloom anew. What once hurt is not gone, it grows into strength. Eloan pressed the journal to her chest and stood in silence. The night had deepened. Stars dotted the garden like seeds cast across velvet. She retraced her steps to the center, and now a third path lit up marked with a lantern. This path was narrower, lined with glowing mushrooms and stones that gave off faint warmth. It led down a gentle slope to a circle of trees, within which stood an old wooden table. On it, a lantern flickered. She sat before it. The flame pulsed, not like fire, but like a heartbeat. Within its glow, she saw herself not as she had been or would be, but as she was now. Still healing. Still searching. But no longer alone. The flame responded. And the journal whispered one more truth onto the page. The lantern path reflects presence. In being, we remember who we are becoming. Eloan closed her eyes. The garden exhaled. Paths would continue to reveal themselves. But tonight, she had walked 3. Joy, grief, self. She made her way slowly back to the hollow house, the journal warm in her hand, her breath slow and sure. The door creaked open before she reached for it. Inside, Narrated sat near the fire, her face soft with understanding. "You found your way," she said. Eloan nodded. "Or maybe it found me." "Same thing in the hollow," Narrated said. "Now rest. The next paths come with dawn." Dawn in Greydown Hollow was not marked by the blare of alarm clocks or the rush of engines. It came gently, almost politely, seeping through the curtains like golden tea, brushed with the scent of moss and morning blossoms. Eloan stirred in the feather-soft bed Narrated had prepared for her, wrapped in patchwork quilts that smelled faintly of lavender and wood smoke. She sat up slowly, the journal still tucked beneath her pillow. Last night's journey lingered in her bones, the spiral path, the petal path, the lantern path. Each one had left something inside her, a warmth, a wound soothed, a recognition. She wasn't the same woman who had arrived here. Not anymore. She dressed in silence and stepped barefoot into the main room of the hollow house. Narrated was nowhere to be seen. Only the sound of the kettle humming gently and the whisper of wind in the rafters accompanied her. A slip of parchment waited on the table, held in place by a smooth river stone. In Narrated's looping script, it read, "The garden still has stories to show you. Today, follow the ivy." Eloan smiled softly, folded the note, and slid it into the journal's inner pocket. She stepped outside into the morning light. The garden shimmered with dew. Bees hummed softly among the lavender. The sky was a muted pearl, clouds stretching like spun silk. The paths from last night had faded, as if they'd never existed, but Eloan no longer needed a map. Her feet seemed to know where to go. She followed the edge of the willow grove, where the moss grew thickest and the sun filtered through high branches in dappled light. Just as she rounded a bend marked by a cluster of foxglove, she saw it. Half hidden beneath a veil of ivy and wild climbing roses stood a small wooden cottage. It was unlike the hollow house, smaller, humbler. The roof sagged in the middle like an old man's shoulders, and the windows were fogged with time. But it wasn't abandoned. Something about it felt watchful. Eloan approached slowly. The ivy didn't resist her touch as she brushed it aside from the door. The wood beneath was worn but not rotten, carved with symbols she didn't recognize, runes or perhaps names long forgotten. There was no lock. Just a round wooden handle. She turned it and stepped inside. The scent hit her first: cedarwood, honey, a trace of something floral and old like pressed violets between pages of a long-lost book. The room was dim, lit only by light filtering through the ivy-covered windows. Dust motes danced lazily in the beams. There was no furniture except a single rocking chair, a writing desk with a cracked ink pot, and a narrow bed pushed against the wall. A worn quilt was folded neatly at its foot. Everything was in perfect stillness, as though someone had left and meant to return. Eloan stepped further in. A sketchbook lay open on the desk. The pages were filled with illustrations, each one a scene from the hollow. The willow tree. The firefly path. The spiral stone circle. But they weren't hers. The name on the first page read, Oren Liss. She whispered the name aloud, and the air in the room shifted. Behind her, the door closed gently of its own accord. She turned and saw that a second door had appeared, smaller, carved into the wall near the bed. It hadn't been visible when she entered. Now, it pulsed faintly with amber light. The journal in her hand grew warm. She opened it. A new page had written itself. Within the cottage lies the echo of another who came before. Follow, and their story may become part of your own. Eloan placed the journal on the desk and knelt before the small door. She opened it. Beyond was not another room, but a passage lined with roots and tiny lanterns flickering with pale green fire. The air was warmer here, fragrant with forgotten blossoms. She crawled inside, and the tunnel widened quickly into a small hidden chamber. At its center stood a table carved from a single tree stump. Upon it, a wooden box. She opened the lid. Inside were letters neatly folded, each tied with green thread. She picked one at random and untied the knot. The ink was faded, but legible. To the next who finds this place. I walked these paths before you. The garden revealed me to myself piece by piece. But there was one part I could not reach alone. I built this cottage as sanctuary. As witness. You, reader, are the next keeper. May the hollow speak freely to you. Oren. Eloan inhaled slowly. Her hands trembled. She read letter after letter, and with each one, she felt less alone. Oren had been a seeker too. A dreamer. A soul half broken, half mending. They had walked these same paths, asked the same questions, felt the same ache to remember something beyond the everyday. And now, this place, the cottage, the garden, had passed to her. She emerged from the chamber hours later, the letters cradled in her arms, and returned to the main room. The light had changed again, afternoon now, soft and buttery. The journal was waiting on the desk. New ink formed as she watched. The ivy path remembers those who lingered. Their stories root and grow beside your own. To listen is to become. To inherit is to continue. Eloan smiled. She stepped out of the cottage and back into the sun-dappled garden. The ivy slid gently back over the doorway, not to hide it, but to protect it. And as she turned toward the next winding path ahead, she no longer walked as a guest. She walked as the new keeper of the hollow's memory. By the time Eloan returned to the hollow house, the garden had begun its slow transformation into twilight. The light that filtered through the trees grew amber, casting long shadows that shifted like silk along the stone paths. The breeze had picked up, carrying the scent of crushed thyme, warm soil, and something elusive, perhaps memory, or perhaps magic. Narrated had not returned. Eloan stepped inside, quiet as a ghost, the letters from the ivy cottage still tucked under her arm. Something about them felt sacred, like pages from a life once lived and lost to time, now entrusted to her care. She placed them gently on the mantel and turned toward the far side of the main room, where an arched doorway led into a smaller sunroom. She hadn't noticed it before. The room was circular, wrapped entirely in windows, glass panes old and bubbled with age, set into a frame of dark oak. Ivy crept up the outer edges, forming a delicate green lattice that filtered the fading light. The floor was tiled in a mosaic of soft blues and grays, each stone worn smooth. At the center of the room stood a single, overstuffed armchair. Its cushions were deep and inviting, its fabric embroidered with spiraling vines and little gold-threaded stars. It was a chair built for remembering. Eloan stepped toward it without thinking, drawn by something older than logic. She sat down slowly, the chair groaning softly beneath her weight as if acknowledging her presence. The window before her opened onto the western side of the garden, the direction the sun was currently dying into, its rays illuminating the firefly grove and the rosevine arches she had walked through. The night before. She let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. The journal was in her lap again. She hadn't consciously brought it. She ran her hand across its cover, then leaned her head back and closed her eyes. It was then that the visions began. They came not like dreams, but like gentle waves lapping at the edge of awareness. Shapes formed behind her eyes, soft, shifting. She saw a girl, not herself, but familiar, sitting in this very chair. The garden outside looked different, wild, and untamed, with different flowers blooming. The girl wore a dark blue cloak and held a needle in one hand, thread glimmering like silver starlight. A voice echoed not aloud, but within her. "You have sat here before." The scene changed. Now a man tall, with eyes the color of winter rain, sat in the chair. He held a letter, sealed in red wax. His hands trembled. The hollow house behind him looked unchanged, but older, perhaps lonelier. "You have waited here before." Another flicker. A child. Barefoot, curls tangled, humming softly as she watched a squirrel dart across the windowsill. She clutched a book to her chest, and though Eloan couldn't see its cover, she knew it was the same journal she held now. "You have remembered here before." The images faded slowly, dissolving like mist in morning sun. Eloan opened her eyes. The sun had nearly set, and the garden was bathed in hues of copper and lavender. Fireflies had begun their dance. Somewhere nearby, a nightiver called out, not mournful, not cheerful, just present. She looked down at the journal. A new page was open. Ink unfurled across it in elegant lines. "The chair by the garden window remembers all who have returned. Here, time thins. Here, the soul leans closest to its echoes. Sit, and let the hollow show you who you were, to become who you are." She touched the page, tracing the curves of the letters. And then unexpectedly more ink bloomed. This time, it was not writing, but a map. Not of paths, but of seasons. A wheel divided into quarters: spring, summer, autumn, winter. Each section held small symbols, plants, stars, animal tracks. Beneath the wheel was a phrase: "Where are you in the turning?" Eloan stared at the wheel. She thought about the spiral path of joy, the petal path of grief, the lantern path of presence, the ivy cottage of memory. Spring, summer, autumn, winter. Perhaps the hollow did not just speak in places but in seasons of the soul. Eloan looked out the window again. The garden's fireflies were brighter now, their light mirrored in the puddles of dew on the leaves. She had a strange sense that something or someone might appear. A visitor from the past. A fragment of herself. But no one came. Only the quiet. And in the quiet, understanding. This chair was not just a resting place. It was a portal, not one that carried you elsewhere, but one that brought elsewhere to you. A place where threads of past lives, hidden selves, and long-forgotten feelings gathered. Eloan stayed for hours. Not because she meant to, but because time stopped asking her to leave. When she finally rose, the stars had taken full possession of the sky. The windows reflected their light as if the room were floating in space. The chair behind her creaked, then stilled, content. She walked slowly back into the main room. On the table, next to the letters from Oren, lay a fresh cup of tea. Steam curled gently. Beside it, a note in Mary's hand. You remembered. Now rest. The next door opens at dawn. Eloan picked up the cup and sat near the fire. Her heart felt fuller than it had in years. Not because she had found answers, but because she had remembered the questions. As the last rays of sunlight slipped behind the horizon, the garden of Greydown Hollow took on a different quality. The sky deepened into a rich indigo, and the first stars flickered to life like tiny beacons. The air cooled, the smell of damp earth rising with each breath, mixing with the fragrance of evening jasmine that had begun to bloom in the far corner of the garden. Eloan stood at the doorway of the hollow house, her fingers brushing the wood as the door swung open. She stepped out onto the stone path, the cool night air kissing her skin. There was a heaviness in the air thick with something unspoken. She had spent the day walking the familiar paths, sitting by the fire, and letting the garden fill her thoughts with answers that felt just out of reach. But now, as the sun bowed out and the night stretched its wings, she felt a pull towards something deeper. The garden was calling her once again. She followed the winding stone path toward the back of the house, where the willow trees stood tall against the encroaching darkness. The moon, still shy in the early night sky, cast soft shadows through the branches, their long fingers swaying gently in the breeze. It was then that she heard it. A faint, melodic chime, as if bells were ringing from a distant place. The sound wasn't harsh or jarring, but soft, like the whisper of wind against a chime made of glass. The sound seemed to rise from the very ground beneath her feet, vibrating in the air. Eloan's heart skipped a beat. She had heard the sound before, but in the daylight, it had been a mere echo, barely noticeable among the rustling leaves and the hum of the bees. Now, it felt different, closer, more insistent. She turned, her eyes scanning the garden, but the path was empty. The chimes rang again, this time clearer. It was as if they were calling to her. Without thinking, Eloan followed the sound, her steps light on the moss-covered stones. The path twisted through the garden, and the world around her grew quieter as she moved further into the night. The moonlight seemed to weave through the trees, painting silver paths on the ground. The sound led her toward the farthest edge of the garden, where a dense thicket of ivy and thick vines covered the walls. Here, the air was thick with the scent of night flowers and something deeper, something that felt ancient. She paused before a small clearing, hidden behind a screen of willows, and there, in the center of the clearing, stood a small, delicate structure. A bell tower. It wasn't a grand tower, like those one might see in old stories or on the horizon of a faraway kingdom. It was simple, made of weathered stone and wood, its bell swaying gently in the breeze. The sound of the chimes came from within the tower, echoing through the still air, as though the bell was singing to the moon. Eloan approached the tower, her breath catching in her throat. She felt as though the tower had been waiting for her, patiently, as if it had always known she would come. The chimes grew louder, as though the tower itself was calling her. She reached the base of the tower and placed her hand on the stone. It was warm, despite the coolness of the night. Her fingers lingered, tracing the ancient runes carved into the surface. They were familiar, though she could not recall where she had seen them before. They pulsed with life, as though the tower itself was breathing, waiting for her touch. With a quiet groan, the tower door creaked open. Eloan stepped inside. The interior of the bell tower was dim, lit only by the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the slats in the walls. The space inside was small, but tall, so tall that the ceiling was lost in shadow. A single staircase spiraled upward, its steps narrow and worn by time. The chimes echoed softly in the background, the sound swirling like a lullaby. At the top of the stairs, Eloan found another door, a wooden door, ancient and weathered. She reached for the handle, her fingers trembling slightly. The door opened with a slow creak. Beyond the door, a balcony jutted out into the night air, overlooking the entire garden of Greydown Hollow. The view was breathtaking. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silver sheen across the garden, and the fireflies glowed like scattered stars, their light soft and calming. But what caught Eloan's attention was not the view, it was what stood before her. A figure. A woman. She was standing at the edge of the balcony, her back to Eloan, looking out over the garden. Her hair was silver, flowing in waves down her back, and her robes shimmered in the moonlight like starlight. There was something ethereal about her, as if she were not fully part of this world. She turned slowly, and Eloan's breath caught in her throat. It was Narrated. But not the Narrated Eloan knew. This Narrated was younger, her eyes filled with a kind of sorrow and wisdom beyond her years. She smiled softly at Eloan, but there was a sadness in her gaze. "You have found me," Narrated said, her voice soft and melodic, like the chimes that had guided Eloan here. Eloan stepped forward, her heart racing. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I am what remains," Narrated replied. "I am the part of Greydown Hollow that you must now understand. The garden holds all of us, those who sought the truth and those who are still seeking. You are now part of this place, Eloan. This is your path, your journey, your purpose." Eloan felt a shiver run through her as she gazed at the woman before her. There was something about Narrated, something that transcended time, something that was both comforting and unsettling. "What do I do?" Eloan asked, her voice trembling with the weight of the moment. Narrated stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch Eloan's shoulder. "You listen," she said softly. "The Hollow speaks to those who are ready. And you, Eloan, are ready." As Narrated's hand made contact with her, Eloan felt a surge of energy, gentle, yet powerful. She felt connected to something larger than herself, something ancient, something that had always been waiting for her. And in that moment, she understood. The night stretched before Eloan, but she no longer felt the weight of its darkness. In fact, the moment Narrated's hand had touched her shoulder, something shifted inside her. The garden, the hollow, the entire world around her felt alive in a way she had never experienced before. She could sense the pulse of the earth beneath her feet, the breath of the trees, and the secret conversations of the wind between the leaves. The night no longer felt like an obstacle, but a cloak, woven from dreams, waiting to wrap her in its embrace. Narrated smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the moon as she stepped back to give Elowen space. "You understand now, don't you?" she asked, her voice low, as though she were speaking to Elowen's very soul. Elowen nodded, her heart swelling with a strange warmth. It wasn't fear, but something more profound, something deep in her bones telling her that this moment, had always been meant to happen. "I feel it," Elowen replied, her voice soft but sure. "I feel like I've always been connected to this place, even before I knew it. Like it's been waiting for me." Narrated smile deepened, as if she had known this all along. She stepped to the side, gesturing to the vast garden that stretched before them. "The hollow is a place of memory and rebirth," Narrated explained. "It holds the stories of those who came before, their hopes and regrets, their joys and sorrows. And now, Elowen, it holds your story. You are no longer just a visitor. You are a part of it. The hollow speaks to those who are ready to listen." Elowen stood still for a moment, allowing the words to sink in. The garden around her felt different now, more than just a collection of trees, flowers, and pathways. It felt like a living, breathing entity, its heartbeat in tune with her own. She reached out and touched the stone railing of the balcony, feeling the vibrations running through the cool surface. "What must I do?" Elowen asked, her voice steady, though her heart raced with the enormity of what was unfolding. "How do I listen?" Narrated turned toward her, her expression soft but knowing. "You've already begun. You've felt the pull of the paths, the chimes that call you, the whispers in the wind. Now, it's time to go deeper. The garden has many layers, and each layer holds a piece of the past, a key to the future. You must walk the paths, yes, but also listen to the roots beneath your feet. Each step you take is part of the journey to understanding." Elowen's eyes followed Narrated's gesture as she looked toward the horizon where the moon had risen higher. The entire garden was bathed in silver, a luminous sea of light and shadow. She saw the spiral stone circle in the distance, the ivy-covered entrance to the hidden glade where the willow tree stood. She had walked these paths before, but now they felt different, as though they were calling to her in a language that only she could understand. "I'm ready," Elowen said, her voice firm. "I want to understand. I want to listen." Narrated nodded, her eyes warm with approval. "Good. There is no rush, but time moves differently here. The longer you stay, the deeper you will go. Trust the hollow, and trust yourself." Elowen turned and began walking toward the garden. As she walked, she felt the ground shift beneath her, the stones beneath her feet feeling warmer, as if the garden was waking up to her presence. The flowers, the trees, the moss, they all seemed to hum with life, an ancient energy that pulsed in the air. She walked past the spiral stone circle, the soft light of the fireflies guiding her steps. Each step felt like a conversation between herself and the earth, as though her every movement was in perfect harmony with the world around her. As she reached the center of the circle, she stopped. The air around her seemed to thicken, the silence enveloping her like a blanket. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and reached down to touch the stone beneath her hand. The stone was warm, and the moment her fingers brushed its surface, she felt something stir deep within her chest. It was as if the stone had unlocked a memory, a connection to something ancient. The air shimmered, and suddenly, the path before her was no longer the same. The trees, the flowers, and the stones began to blur, shifting into an image from the past. She saw herself, another version of herself, standing in the same spot, but younger, her eyes filled with wonder and uncertainty. The garden was different then, more wild, untamed, but there was the same sense of familiarity, as if this place had always been hers. And there was someone else there, a figure standing in the shadows of the trees, watching her with soft, knowing eyes. It was Married, but not the Married Eloan had come to know. This Married was younger, too, her face unlined by time, her eyes bright with hope. "You're not alone here," the younger Married whispered, her voice carrying across the space like a song. Eloan reached out to her, but the image flickered, fading away like mist in the morning sun. The air around her cleared, and she found herself standing in the present again, the stone circle still beneath her hand. She opened her eyes. The world was the same, yet different. The hollow was waiting for her, and Eloan knew that she had just taken the first step on a journey that would change everything. It wasn't just about finding answers. It was about remembering who she had been, who she was, and who she could become. She smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. The garden was no longer a place of solitude. It was a place of connection, of roots that stretched deep into the earth, intertwining with her own. And as the first light of dawn began to break, Eloan walked forward, ready to follow the path that lay before her. As the first light of dawn touched the tips of the willow branches, Eloan felt something shift within her. The air felt alive, charged with an energy she couldn't quite name, something ancient, something eternal. The hollow was waking, and she could feel it in every part of her being. The earth beneath her feet hummed with a soft rhythm, and the trees above her whispered in a language she had always known but never truly understood. She walked through the garden, her steps light, her heart open, as the sun slowly crept higher into the sky. The fireflies that had danced through the night were now gone, their tiny lights replaced by the brilliant glow of morning. But even in the daylight, the garden was still full of mystery. Every corner held a secret. Every flower, every stone, every leaf seemed to hold a memory, a piece of the past that was waiting to be uncovered. Eloan had walked these paths before, but today they felt different. The familiar paths of the spiral stone circle, the petal path, and the lantern path were no longer just paths, they were veins, threads of connection that tied her to something much greater than herself. She stopped at the foot of the willow tree, where the roots twisted deep into the earth, their gnarled fingers reaching out like the hands of forgotten ancestors. There, beneath the shade of its wide branches, she felt the presence of something older than time itself, a deep, grounding force that seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. And then, from the stillness of the air, a soft, melodic sound filled the space, a song. The song was not something she heard with her ears, but something she felt with her soul. It was the song of the hollow, the song of the garden, the song of the earth itself. It was ancient, a lullaby of roots and stars, a hymn to the forgotten past. Eloan closed her eyes and let the song wash over her. It was a strange sensation, as though the melody was pulling her in, weaving itself into the very fabric of her being. She could feel the song resonating in her chest, in her fingertips, in the very marrow of her bones. It was a song of connection, of unity, of belonging. It was a song of the hollow, but it was also a song of her. A song that had always been a part of her, waiting to be remembered. Her body began to move, not with her conscious will, but with the rhythm of the song. Her feet began to sway, her arms lifted as if guided by invisible hands. She felt the earth beneath her respond, the roots of the willow tree shifting slightly, reaching up to meet her, as if they, too, recognized her as part of the song. For the first time since she had arrived in the hollow, Eloan truly felt the garden. She wasn't just walking through it, she was becoming it. She was the wind that rustled the leaves. She was the stream that trickled through the rocks. She was the flower that bloomed in the early morning light. She was part of the hollow, and the hollow was part of her. The song swelled, and Eloan felt a tear slip down her cheek. It wasn't sadness. It was something deeper, a release. A letting go of everything she had been before. The weight of the world, the burden of her past, melted away in the embrace of the song. She was not Eloan the traveler, Eloan the seeker, or Eloan the lost. She was Eloan, the one who had always been meant to be here. The one who had always been a part of this garden, this hollow, this earth. The song reached its crescendo, and then, as quickly as it had come, it faded. The garden was still again, the air thick with the memory of the melody. But Eloan was not the same. She felt more alive than she had ever felt before. Her heart was open, her mind clear. She was no longer a stranger to this place. She had become one with it. She opened her eyes and looked around. The garden had not changed, but she had. The path ahead of her stretched forward, but it no longer felt like an unknown journey. It felt like a homecoming. And yet, something tugged at her heart, something more. She turned toward the willow tree again. The roots that had once seemed so ancient, so distant, now felt like familiar hands reaching out to her. She stepped forward, drawn by an unseen force. The moment her foot touched the earth beneath the tree, the ground shifted. The roots moved, parting like a curtain, revealing a small opening, a doorway. Eloan hesitated for only a moment before stepping through. Beyond the door was a small, hidden grove, bathed in a soft, golden light. In the center of the grove stood a stone pedestal, and on the pedestal was a single object, an ancient key. The key was made of silver, its design intricate, almost otherworldly, with vines and leaves wrapped around its handle. It shimmered in the soft light, as if waiting for her. Eloan stepped forward, her hand reaching out to grasp it. The moment her fingers touched the key, she felt a surge of energy, a wave of warmth that spread from her fingertips to her chest. The key belonged to her. She could feel it. It was not just a key to a door, but a key to something much greater. To understanding. To her purpose. She lifted the key, and the grove seemed to respond, the trees swaying in time with the pulse of her heart. The key was hers. And with it, the hollow's deepest secrets were waiting to be unlocked. Eloan stood still in the hidden grove, the silver key warm in her hand, its intricate vines twisting around the shaft like ancient symbols. She felt a strange calm, a deep understanding in her chest, as though the key itself was an extension of her soul. There was no hesitation now, no question of what was to come. The hollow had been guiding her all along, and now, it was time to unlock its heart. With a steady breath, she turned, stepping back toward the willow tree. The roots had parted, revealing the doorway she had just passed through, but now, the path ahead felt different. The air was thicker, charged with the same energy that had pulsed through her when the song of the garden had filled her. She knew this was no longer a simple walk through the garden. This was the beginning of something much deeper. The key fit perfectly into the opening in the tree's roots, as though the tree had been waiting for her touch all this time. She pushed the key in, and a soft click echoed through the grove. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the air shimmered, as if reality itself were bending. The ground beneath her feet hummed, and the trees around her began to sway, their branches reaching toward her, as though they were part of some ancient ritual. The door opened. The world on the other side was not what she expected. Instead of the familiar garden, she found herself in a vast chamber of stone, its walls lined with roots and glowing with the same soft, golden light she had seen in the hidden grove. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient wood. A soft, rhythmic pulsing echoed through the space, like the heartbeat of the hollow itself. The chamber was alive. In the center of the room stood a stone pedestal, taller than any Eloan had ever seen. Upon it was a crystal, a large, glowing sphere, suspended in mid-air by a web of vines. The crystal was pulsing, its light steady and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. The vines that held it in place seemed to be feeding into the crystal, drawing energy from it. Eloan stepped closer, her heart racing. She reached out, but before she could touch the crystal, a voice filled the room, soft, ethereal, like the sound of wind through leaves. "You have come." The voice was both distant and immediate, as though it was coming from everywhere at once. Eloan froze, her fingers just inches from the crystal. "You are the keeper now. The hollow has called you." The voice seemed to reverberate within her, filling her chest, her mind, her very soul. She was not afraid. She felt no danger. Only an overwhelming sense of connection, of recognition. As if the hollow had always known she would be here. "This is the heart of the hollow," the voice continued. "The source of its power. It is what has sustained the garden for centuries. It is what has kept the balance, the flow of time, the memory of the earth. But the heart is no longer whole. It is fractured. And only the keeper can restore it. Eloan swallowed, her breath catching in her throat. She had known this moment was coming, but the weight of it now, the enormity of her responsibility, it was unlike anything she had ever imagined. How? She asked, her voice steady despite the swirling emotions inside her. The voice responded, soft but firm, with the key, you must restore the heart. Place it into the crystal, and you will unlock the hollow's true power. But be warned, it will change you. It will change everything. Once the heart is restored, there will be no going back. The hollow will remember all that has been forgotten, and all that has been lost. Eloan looked down at the silver key in her hand. She could feel the weight of it, not just in her palm, but in her heart. She had felt the hollow's presence all along, its whispers guiding her, its energy pulsing through the earth beneath her feet. But now, she could feel it more clearly than ever. The hollow was alive, and it was waiting for her to make her choice. She stepped forward, her fingers trembling as she placed the key into the crystal's core. The moment the key touched the crystal, the room erupted with light. The vines pulsed, the crystal began to hum, and the air crackled with energy. The light became blinding, engulfing her in a glow that seemed to stretch on forever. She felt herself pulled inward, toward the crystal, toward the heart of the hollow. The world around her began to fade, replaced by visions of the past. She saw the hollow as it had once been, lush, vibrant, teeming with life. She saw the first keeper, standing in this very chamber, placing the key into the crystal, and feeling the surge of energy that followed. She saw the hollow's history, its triumphs, its sorrows. She saw herself, another version of herself, standing before the crystal, reaching for the heart. And then, just as suddenly, everything went dark. For a moment, Eloan was lost in the void, suspended in time, weightless, and alone. Then, slowly, the darkness receded, and she found herself back in the chamber. The light had dimmed, but the crystal still pulsed, its energy no longer overwhelming, but steady, constant. She looked down at her hands. They were no longer the hands of the girl who had arrived in Greydown Hollow, unsure and searching. They were the hands of the keeper. The change was subtle, but undeniable. She could feel it in her bones. She was no longer just a visitor. She was part of the hollow, part of its very fabric. She could feel its pulse beneath her feet, its heartbeat in her chest, its memory in her mind. The hollow had accepted her. And now, it was hers to protect. The air was thick with anticipation as Eloan stood before the glowing crystal, its pulse now steady in the heart of the hollow. The weight of her new role pressed against her chest, but it was not a burden of fear, it was a burden of purpose. She had not just unlocked the power of the hollow. She had become its keeper, the protector of its ancient memory, its secret, and its power. Her hand, still warm from touching the crystal, hovered above the pedestal. The chamber had settled into a profound silence, the kind of silence that only came with the passing of time, with centuries of history and stories left untold. The vines around the crystal were still, their glow dimming as the energy began to stabilize. But Eloan knew this peace was only temporary. There was a shift in the hollow, something subtle but undeniable, like a ripple in a still pond. The balance of the garden, of the very earth beneath her feet, had changed, and she had been the catalyst. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the change settle into her bones. She had always known there was something more to the hollow, something deeper beneath the surface. But now, she could feel it, the pulsing energy of the earth, the ancient power that flowed through the roots of the trees, through the soil, through the very air itself. The song of the hollow, the one she had heard on her first night here, seemed to hum in the back of her mind, calling her forward, urging her to listen. Eloan, a soft voice called, and she turned to find Narrated standing in the doorway of the chamber. Her face was unreadable, her eyes dark with something unspoken. "I knew it would come to this," Narrated said quietly, stepping into the room. "You've done it. You've unlocked the heart. But it's not just the garden that changes now. It's everything." Eloan frowned, sensing the unease in Narrated's voice. "What do you mean?" "I've done what I was meant to do, haven't I? I've restored the hollow's heart." Narrated shook her head slowly, her gaze fixed on the crystal. Restoring the heart was only the beginning. The hollow's power is vast, but it's fragile. Its balance is delicate. And there are forces that seek to disrupt it. Eloan stepped closer, her curiosity piqued. "What kind of forces?" Narrated's eyes flickered with a hint of fear, something rare in her usually calm demeanor. "There are those who wish to control the power of the hollow, those who would use it for their own purposes, to reshape the world as they see fit. They know what you've done. And they will come for you." Eloan felt a chill run through her. "Who are they? What do they want?" Narrated's face softened, and she stepped forward, placing a hand on Eloan's shoulder. "The hollow has always been a place of memory and rebirth, a sanctuary of sorts, for those who seek peace. But it is also a place of great power. The key you use to unlock the heart, it is a key to more than just the hollow. It is a key to the past, to forgotten realms and lost knowledge. And there are those who would stop at nothing to possess it." Eloan felt a knot form in her stomach. She had never considered the implications of what she had done. She had been so focused on restoring the hollow, on understanding its secrets, that she had never imagined the danger it could bring. "What do I do?" Eloan asked, her voice steady but uncertain. "How can I protect the hollow?" Narrated's eyes softened, and she nodded. "There is more you must learn, Eloan. More about the hollow, its history, its guardians, and the forces that seek to control it. You are the keeper now, and you must learn to wield its power not for yourself, but for the garden, for its memory, and for the balance it holds in the world. Eloan's heart pounded in her chest. She had only just begun to understand the hollow, and now she was being thrust into a role she had never imagined. But something within her, something deep and ancient, stirred with recognition. She had always felt connected to the earth, to the garden, to this place. Perhaps, she thought, this was the path she had always been meant to walk. "I'm ready," Eloan said, her voice steady and resolute. "I will protect the hollow. I will learn what I need to, and I will keep it safe." Narrated smiled, a faint glimmer of pride in her eyes. "I know you will, Eloan. But remember this: there is no turning back. The hollow will show you its secrets, but it will also test you. There are trials ahead, and you will need all your strength, your wisdom, and your heart to face them." With those words, Narrated turned and walked toward the door, but then she paused, her hand resting on the handle. "The garden will guide you," she said softly, "but you must also be willing to listen. Not just to the hollow, but to yourself. Your true self. The one who has always been part of this place." And with that, Narrated was gone, leaving Eloan alone in the chamber with the glowing crystal, the pulse of the hollow, and the weight of her newfound responsibility. Eloan took a deep breath and walked toward the pedestal. The crystal shimmered, its light softer now, but still powerful, still constant. She reached out, placing her hand on its surface, and for a moment, she felt the entire garden, the entire hollow, respond to her touch. The trees seemed to stretch toward her, the earth beneath her feet hummed with life, and the air itself seemed to breathe with her. The song of the hollow, that quiet melody, filled her mind once more. But now, it was clearer, more distinct. It was not just a song of the garden. It was her song. Her heart. Her path. And as she stood there, feeling the pulse of the hollow beneath her fingers, Eloan knew that this was just the beginning. The journey ahead would not be easy, but it was hers. The hollow had chosen her, and now it was her turn to protect it, to listen to its secrets, and to face the challenges that lay ahead. The first trial came without warning. Eloan had spent the morning walking through the garden, taking in the new sense of responsibility that weighed on her heart. The garden was still, as if waiting for her to acknowledge its presence, to claim her place as its true keeper. The song of the hollow whispered faintly in the back of her mind, guiding her steps as she wandered along the familiar paths. But now, the quiet was different. It was as if the garden was holding its breath, watching her with an intensity she had never felt before. She paused at the edge of the spiral stone circle, the spot where everything had begun. The stones, once warm with the pulse of the garden, now felt cold. The energy of the hollow had shifted again, this time darker, more uncertain. It was then that she felt it, a sudden weight on her chest, as if the very air had thickened around her. A low hum filled the space, like the sound of distant thunder, and the ground beneath her feet trembled. Her hand instinctively went to the silver key that hung at her side, the one she had used to restore the heart. She felt its warmth, a reminder of the power it had unlocked. And then, before her eyes, the stones of the spiral circle began to shift. The ground cracked open with a deafening noise, sending up a cloud of dust and dirt. The once still garden now swirled with energy, the trees creaking as if they were alive with fear. The vines that had once been her protectors now seemed to recoil, twisting and writhing as if something was rising from beneath. The air grew colder, and the song of the hollow faded, replaced by an eerie silence. Eloan's heart raced as she stepped back, watching in horror as the earth split further. From the depths of the fissure, a figure emerged, a tall, dark silhouette, shrouded in shadows. Eloan's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen anything like it. The figure was neither fully human nor fully of the garden. It was a creature of darkness, its form shifting and contorting like smoke, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The creature spoke in a voice that sent shivers through her entire body. "The keeper has come." The voice was not just spoken, but felt echoing in her mind, in her bones. "The garden has awakened, and the power of the heart is mine to claim." Eloan stepped forward, her heart pounding. "Who are you?" she demanded. "What do you want with the hollow?" The creature's eyes gleamed, and it tilted its head, as if amused. "What I want is what you have now, Keeper. The power to reshape this world. The power to claim the garden's heart for my own." The hollow was never meant to remain in one place, untouched. Its power must flow. It must be freed. "And I will take what you have unlocked." Eloan stood her ground, her hand still on the key. She felt the pulse of the hollow beneath her feet, and in that moment, she knew what she had to do. "The hollow is not yours to take," she said, her voice steady. "It belongs to the earth, to the memories that have been kept here. You cannot control it. You cannot make it yours." The creature's form twisted, as if laughing at her defiance. "The hollow is a tool, Keeper. It is a force to be bent and shaped. And I will break it. I will break you." The ground beneath her trembled again, and the shadows around the creature grew darker, swirling like smoke. Eloan felt a surge of energy, cold and sharp, move through the air. The garden seemed to respond to the threat, its vines reaching out, but they were no match for the dark figure's power. It twisted them with a thought, and the vines recoiled, their once solid grip faltering. Eloan's heart raced. She needed to act quickly. The creature was powerful, but it was not the hollow. It was not the garden. With a deep breath, Eloan raised the silver key, feeling its energy surge through her. The hollow's power pulsed within her, and she could feel the very earth beneath her feet awakening, ready to fight. The key glowed brightly in her hand, and the moment it touched the air, a shock wave of energy blasted from it, forcing the creature back. The dark figure screeched in pain as the light from the key pushed against the shadows. "You cannot keep me out forever, Keeper," the creature snarled, but it began to retreat into the cracks in the earth, its form flickering like a dying flame. The hollow will fall. It will be mine. But Elowen didn't let up. She stepped forward, the key glowing brighter, its energy more powerful than ever. Not while I'm here. With one final burst of energy, Elowen pushed the creature back into the fissure, sealing the crack with the force of the hollow's power. The ground rumbled as the garden's energy surged, wrapping around the creature and trapping it deep beneath the earth. The hollow's pulse returned, steady and strong, as if it had been restored. The air grew still once more, and the sun broke through the clouds, bathing the garden in light. The vines that had once recoiled now gently reached toward her, as if thanking her. Elowen stood there, panting, the key still glowing in her hand. She had done it. But even as the garden returned to its peaceful state, Elowen knew that this was only the beginning. The creature had been sealed for now, but it was not gone. It would return, and she would have to face it again. The trials had only just begun. She turned, looking out over the garden, and felt a deep sense of resolve settle within her. She was the keeper now. And it was her duty to protect the hollow, to defend it against the darkness that sought to claim it. The trials of the hollow were far from over. But Elowen was ready. The hollow was quiet again, but Elowen could still feel the pulse of its heartbeat beneath her feet. The ground was still, but the energy had shifted. The creature she had banished was not truly gone, it was only sealed, trapped beneath the earth, waiting for the right moment to return. Elowen knew that her journey was far from over. She had faced one trial, but there would be more. The hollow had given her its heart, its power, but it was also demanding something from her. It was asking her to become more than just its keeper. It was asking her to understand its deepest secrets, to wield its power, but also to protect it from those who would misuse it. The garden had shown her its beauty, its peace, but it had also shown her its darkness, the shadow that lurked just beneath the surface, waiting to emerge. Elowen walked through the garden, her steps slow and deliberate. The air was thick with the scent of earth and flowers, but there was an underlying tension in the stillness. The vines swayed in the breeze, their leaves rustling, but there was no song. The fireflies, once so bright and lively, now flickered weakly in the distance, as if they, too, were wary of the darkness that had been stirred. She stopped at the edge of the spiral stone circle, where the earth had cracked open, where the creature had emerged. The stones were quiet now, but Elowen knew that the crack would remain. It was a reminder of the battle she had fought, and the battle yet to come. A voice echoed in her mind, soft but insistent. Elowen. She turned sharply, her hand instinctively reaching for the key at her side. The air shimmered for a moment, and Narrated stepped out from the shadows of the trees. Her face was serious, her eyes dark with concern. Elowen, Narrated said again, stepping forward. The hollow is not as safe as you think. There are forces at work here that you do not fully understand. Elowen felt a chill run through her. What do you mean? I sealed the creature away. I protected the hollow. Married nodded slowly, her gaze distant. Yes, you did. But the creature was not the only danger. The hollow has many layers, many secrets. And not all of them are kind. There are those who seek to manipulate the power of the garden, to use it for their own ends. Eloan frowned, her grip tightening on the key. What are you saying? Who would want to control the hollow? Mareed's eyes darkened. There are forces from beyond the hollow, ancient, dark powers that would use its heart to reshape the world. They know what you have done. They know that the heart has been restored. And they will come for it? Eloan's pulse quickened. What do I do? How can I stop them? Mareed's face softened, but her voice was grave. You must learn to listen to the hollow. The garden will guide you, but you must trust yourself. You are the keeper now. You hold the key to the hollow's heart, but you also hold the key to its survival. You must learn to protect it, to understand its power, and to know when to fight. The weight of Mareed's words settled heavily on Eloan's shoulders. She had thought she was ready. She had thought the battle was over. But now she realized that it had only just begun. There is more you need to know, Mareed continued. The hollow has its protectors, those who guard its secrets. But even they cannot stand against the darkness alone. You will need allies. You will need strength, courage, and wisdom. And you must find them before it is too late. Eloan nodded slowly, her mind racing with questions. Where do I start? What do I do? Mareed placed a hand on her shoulder, her touch warm and steady. You will know when the time comes. Trust the hollow. It will show you the way. With that, Mareed turned and walked back toward the trees, her figure slowly fading into the shadows. Eloan stood there for a moment, staring after her, the weight of her words sinking in. The hollow was not just a place of peace. It was a place of power, that could either protect or destroy. And it was her responsibility to ensure that it was protected. She took a deep breath and turned back toward the spiral stone circle. There was still much to learn. Much to understand. And she knew, deep down, that the trials were far from over. The hollow had given her its power, but it had also given her its burden. And now, Eloan knew she had to face it. Eloan stood at the edge of the spiral stone circle, the weight of Mareed's words still heavy in her chest. The garden around her seemed still, almost as if holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The hollow had shifted, and she knew that her role as keeper was not just one of guardianship, it was a calling. But the burden of that calling weighed on her like an ancient stone, pressing down on her chest with every breath. She had sealed the creature beneath the earth, but she knew that was only the first battle. The true war was yet to come. The forces Narrated spoke of, the ancient dark powers that sought to control the Hollow, would not be so easily dismissed. They had watched her unlock the heart, and now they would come for it. But Eloan would not face this alone. She couldn't. Narrated had spoken of allies, of protectors who guarded the Hollow's secrets. Eloan knew she had to find them before it was too late. But where would she start? How would she find those who could help her defend the Hollow? The Hollow itself would guide her, she knew. The garden had already shown her so much, had already revealed its power to her. She could feel its pulse beneath her feet, in the air, in her very soul. But now, it was time to listen not just to the Hollow, but to herself, to the deep well of knowledge that had always been within her. Eloan took a deep breath and turned toward the path that led deeper into the garden. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the stone paths. The fireflies, now faint, fluttered around her, their tiny lights blinking in the twilight. They were like tiny beacons, guiding her forward. She had walked these paths before, but tonight, they felt different. The air was thick with magic, and every step she took felt charged with energy. The garden was alive, aware of her presence, aware of the weight she carried. She could feel the garden's heart beating in time with her own. It was not just a place. It was a living entity, and she was its keeper. As she walked, the garden seemed to shift around her, leading her toward a part of the Hollow she had not yet explored. The trees parted, and she found herself standing before a large stone archway, its surface covered in intricate carvings. The carvings were unlike anything she had seen before, ancient symbols, runes that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light. She approached the archway slowly, her hand reaching out to touch the stone. The moment her fingers brushed against it, the archway began to glow, its light pulsating in time with her heartbeat. The air around her hummed with energy, and the ground beneath her feet vibrated with power. Eloan stepped through the archway, and the world around her shifted. She found herself in a clearing, surrounded by ancient trees whose branches reached up toward the sky like the arms of giants. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the ground was soft beneath her feet. The clearing felt ancient, untouched, as if it had existed long before the Hollow had been created. At the center of the clearing stood a large stone circle, similar to the spiral stone circle, but larger, more imposing. The stones were weathered by time, their surfaces worn smooth by the passage of centuries. The circle was bathed in a soft, golden light, and in the center of it stood a figure. The figure was tall, cloaked in a robe of deep blue that shimmered with silver threads, and their face was obscured by a hood. Eloan couldn't see their eyes, but she could feel their gaze on her, as if they were watching her every move. The figure stepped forward, and their voice, deep and melodic, filled the clearing. "You are the keeper of the Hollow," the figure said, their voice carrying the weight of ages. "We have been waiting for you." Eloan stood frozen, her heart racing. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What is this place?" The figure tilted their head, as if considering her question. This is the heart of the hollow, they said. It is where the hollow was born, where its power was first awakened. It is the source of all life within this garden, and it is the place where the keepers are chosen. Eloan's mind raced. Chosen. She repeated. I was chosen. The figure nodded. Yes. You were chosen by the hollow, not by chance, but by destiny. The hollow knew you would come, knew you would awaken its heart and restore its power. But there are others who seek to use this power for their own ends. You are the only one who can stop them. Eloan felt a surge of determination rise within her. I won't let them take it, she said, her voice firm. I'll protect the hollow. I'll protect its power. The figure stepped closer, their cloak billowing in the wind. You will need allies, they said. The hollow cannot be protected by one alone. There are others who have walked these paths before you. Seek them out. They are the guardians of the hollow, the ones who protect its secrets and its power. They will help you in your fight. Eloan's heart quickened. Where can I find them? The figure raised a hand, and the stone circle around them began to glow with a soft, ethereal light. They are waiting for you, they said. You will know them when the time comes. They will come to you, just as you have come to the hollow. The figure stepped back, their form beginning to fade into the mist. Trust the hollow, they whispered. Trust yourself. You are the keeper now, and you are not alone. With that, the figure disappeared, leaving Eloan standing alone in the clearing. The stones of the circle glowed faintly, their energy still pulsing in the air. Eloan stood there for a moment, taking in the weight of what had just transpired. She was the keeper now. And she had been chosen for this journey, for this battle. But she was not alone. The guardians of the hollow were out there, waiting for her. And together, they would fight to protect the hollow's heart. Eloan stood at the edge of the hollow, the garden stretching out before her like a vast, untamed world. The trees whispered in the wind, the flowers bloomed in their own time, and the earth beneath her feet seemed to hum with the pulse of life. It was as if the hollow itself had become a part of her, its rhythms, its energies, flowing through her veins. But now, she knew the time had come to leave the sanctuary of this place. The figure she had met in the heart of the hollow had been clear. The guardians, the seekers who had walked this path before her, were out there, waiting. They were the ones who would help her protect the hollow, help her fight the dark forces that sought to claim its power. But where were they? Who were they? And how would she find them? Her eyes scanned the horizon, the sun hanging low in the sky, casting long shadows across the garden. She had no answers yet, only the echo of the figure's words in her mind. They are waiting for you. You will know them when the time comes. She had to trust in that, in the hollow's guidance. Taking a deep breath, Eloan turned and walked deeper into the garden. The path seemed to shift around her, as if they too were aware of her purpose. Each step she took felt more determined, more certain. The hollow was not just a garden, it was a living, breathing entity, and it was now her responsibility to protect it. As she walked, the air around her began to change. The sweet scent of flowers faded, replaced by the smell of damp earth and mist. The trees became taller, their branches twisting into eerie shapes. The garden was shifting, growing darker, as if responding to her presence. The once welcoming landscape now seemed more ominous, as though the garden itself was testing her. Eloan's heart raced. Was this a test? Was this part of the hollow's trials? She had no way of knowing. All she could do was press on. And then, she saw them. At the farthest edge of the garden, just beyond a thick veil of mist, stood a group of figures. They were cloaked in dark robes, their faces obscured by hoods. They moved with a quiet grace, almost as if they were part of the garden itself, as if the trees and the wind had given birth to them. Eloan's pulse quickened. This was it. These were the guardians. These were the ones who would help her. She approached cautiously, her hand instinctively resting on the silver key at her side. The figures didn't move to acknowledge her presence, but she could feel their awareness, their eyes on her, even from a distance. The air around them seemed to shimmer with power, an energy she could almost taste on the back of her tongue. When she reached them, one of the figures stepped forward. A woman, tall and regal, with silver hair that cascaded down her back like a waterfall of moonlight. Her eyes, though hidden by her hood, glowed with an inner fire, bright and piercing. She raised her hand, and the air around Eloan seemed to still, as if waiting for something. "You are the keeper," the woman said, her voice calm but firm, like the wind whispering through ancient trees. "You have come seeking us." Eloan nodded, her heart racing. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady but uncertain. "I need your help. The hollow is in danger. I cannot protect it alone." The woman studied her for a moment, as if weighing her words. Then, without a word, she turned and gestured for Eloan to follow. The guardians led her deeper into the garden, into a part she had never seen before. The air grew colder, the trees denser, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the sky. The ground beneath her feet became softer, like walking on moss. The silence was thick, almost oppressive, as though the very earth was holding its breath. Finally, they reached a clearing unlike any Eloan had seen before. The ground was covered in intricate patterns, like a mosaic, and in the center stood an ancient stone altar. The altar was covered in vines, but the vines were not ordinary. They glowed with a faint, ethereal light, like the stars had fallen to earth and become rooted in the soil. The woman stepped forward, placing her hand on the altar. The vines parted, revealing a glowing symbol etched into the stone. It was a symbol Eloan had seen before, the same symbol that had been carved into the heart of the hollow. "This is the heart stone," the woman explained. It is the source of the hollow's power, the foundation upon which the garden was built. It is the key to all life here, and it is the key to your power as keeper. Eloan stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch the heartstone. The moment her fingers made contact with it, a surge of energy shot through her. It was like a jolt of lightning, but it didn't hurt. It was pure, raw power, coursing through her veins, filling her with knowledge and strength. She gasped, stepping back in surprise. The symbols on the heartstone glowed brighter, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. "You feel it," the woman said. "The power of the hollow. It is within you now, Eloan. It has chosen you, and you have chosen it. But with this power comes great responsibility. You must protect the heartstone. You must protect the garden." Eloan nodded, still reeling from the surge of energy. "I will protect it. I will protect the hollow." The woman studied her for a moment, then nodded. "We will help you. We are the seekers of the hollow. We have guarded this garden for centuries. We will stand by you, but you must be ready. The darkness that seeks to destroy the hollow is ancient. It is not something that can be easily defeated." Eloan clenched her fists, feeling the power of the hollow flowing through her. "I'm ready." The woman smiled faintly. "Good. Then the trials begin. But remember, Eloan, the path ahead is not just one of strength. It is a path of wisdom, of understanding, and of sacrifice." Eloan took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She had come this far. And now, with the seekers by her side, she would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The hollow would be protected. The moon hung high in the sky, casting its pale light over Greydown Hollow as Eloan stood at the edge of the clearing, surrounded by the seekers. The air was still, as if holding its breath, awaiting the first step of the keeper into the trials that lay ahead. She could feel the weight of her new role, the power of the hollow coursing through her, but also the responsibility that came with it. She was no longer just a traveler. She was its protector, its guardian, its keeper. The seekers were silent around her, their eyes fixed on her with a mixture of respect and concern. They had been the protectors of the hollow for centuries, and now, they were entrusting her with its future. Eloan took a deep breath, the weight of their gaze not heavy, but reassuring. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. The hollow has many secrets, the woman with the silver hair, the leader of the seekers, spoke softly. And each secret comes with a trial. A test of your worth. A test of your heart. You must be prepared, Eloan. The trials will challenge you in ways you cannot imagine. Eloan nodded, her heart steady. I'm ready, she said, her voice firm, though she could feel the uncertainty stirring beneath her confidence. She knew what was at stake. This was not just about her survival. It was about the hollow's survival. About the preservation of everything the garden represented: its history, its memories, and its power. The woman studied her for a moment before nodding. "Very well," she said. "The first trial is one of the heart. You must face the truth within yourself. The hollow will show you what lies buried beneath your soul. It will show you the parts of yourself you have hidden, the parts you have refused to acknowledge." Eloan's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean? What will it show me?" The woman's eyes were dark, almost sorrowful. "You will see. The hollow knows you better than you know yourself. It will show you your deepest fears, your regrets, your desires. But you must face them, Eloan. Only then will you be ready for the next trial." Without another word, she gestured toward the center of the clearing. Eloan stepped forward, her heart pounding. She didn't know what awaited her, but she knew one thing for sure: there was no turning back now. The ground beneath her feet seemed to shift as she stepped into the center of the clearing. The air grew thick, charged with energy. The moonlight grew brighter, flooding the space with its ethereal glow. She felt the hollow's pulse beneath her feet, the rhythm of the earth syncing with her own heartbeat. It was as though the garden itself was alive, watching her, waiting. Then, everything went silent. The wind ceased to blow. The trees stood still, their leaves frozen in place. The air around her hummed with anticipation, and Eloan felt a strange pulling sensation, like an invisible force drawing her deeper into the garden. The ground beneath her feet cracked open, a thin line forming like a seam in the earth. Eloan took a hesitant step back, but the line spread wider, the earth splitting open to reveal a dark, swirling void beneath her. The hollow's voice, deep and resonant, filled the air. "Face your truth, Eloan." Before she could react, the void beneath her grew wider, and suddenly, she was falling. The world around her spun, and for a moment, she felt weightless, as though she were floating in a dream. The wind howled around her, but it wasn't the wind of the garden. It was a cold, biting wind, carrying with it the scent of decay. Then, with a sharp jolt, she landed on solid ground. The world around her was dark, but she could see faint lights in the distance, flickers of fire, like distant lanterns. She stood up, her legs shaky from the fall, and slowly began to walk toward the lights. As she drew closer, the shadows began to take shape, and Eloan realized she was standing in a forest, much like the hollow, but different. The trees were twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching toward the sky like fingers, dark and skeletal. In the distance, a figure stood, silhouetted against the flickering light. Eloan's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the figure. "Mother," she whispered. The figure turned, and Eloan's breath caught in her throat. It was her mother, but not as she had been in life. This version of her was cold, distant, her eyes empty and hollow, like two dark voids that swallowed everything around her. "You are here," her mother said, her voice flat and lifeless. "You always were." Eloan took a step forward, her heart aching. I don't understand, she stammered. What is this? Why are you like this? Her mother's gaze never shifted. You ran away, Eloan, she said, her voice echoing with the weight of an old, buried grief. You left us behind. You left me behind. You could never face the truth of who you are. Who you really are. Eloan felt a pang in her chest, but she fought it down. No, I didn't leave you. I had to leave. I had to find myself. I had to be free. Her mother shook her head slowly. You were never free, Eloan. You were always running from something. From the truth. The ground beneath Eloan's feet trembled. The shadows around her deepened, and the lights flickered, casting the forest in an eerie glow. The trees seemed to close in around her, and the air grew thick with the scent of earth and decay. Face your truth, Eloan, her mother's voice echoed again. Face what you have been hiding from all your life. Suddenly, Eloan was back at the edge of the spiral stone circle, standing alone in the garden, her heart racing. The earth was quiet again, the garden still. The voice of the hollow had faded, but its words remained in her mind. Face your truth, Eloan. She felt her legs give out, and she sank to her knees on the ground. The weight of her emotions, of the guilt, the fear, the longing to escape, crashed over her like a wave. She had never truly faced the truth of who she was, of what she had left behind. She had been running from herself, running from the pain of her past, the grief of losing her family, the fear of becoming something she couldn't understand. But now, in the heart of the hollow, she could no longer hide. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes, and slowly, with trembling hands, she reached down and touched the earth beneath her. The hollow was alive, and it was calling her to face what she had long avoided. I am ready, she whispered, her voice steady despite the tears that had begun to fall. The earth around her hummed with energy, the hollow's pulse steady beneath her. The trees swayed in the wind, their branches reaching toward her as though offering her their strength. Eloan stood up slowly, her heart filled with resolve. The first trial had been passed, but there would be more. And she was ready to face them, ready to accept the truth of who she was, and ready to protect the hollow with everything she had. The days passed like ripples on the surface of a still pond. Eloan walked the paths of the hollow with a new understanding, a new purpose. The weight of her responsibilities as keeper settled into her bones, but it was no longer a burden, it was a calling. The garden, once a place of beauty and peace, now felt like a living, breathing entity, its power flowing through her with each step. The hollow had accepted her, and she had accepted it. But there were still shadows lurking in the corners of her mind, lingering doubts that she couldn't shake. The first trial had shown her parts of herself she had long buried, the fear of her own past, the guilt of running from her family, the fear of becoming something she didn't understand. And now, with the weight of the Heartstone in her hands, she felt that the hollow was calling her to go deeper. She had already faced her truth, but there were still layers beneath the surface, still things that had to be uncovered. The path ahead was clear, but it was also uncertain. The hollow was more than just a garden. It was a crossroads, a place where all paths converged, where all truths were revealed, and where all secrets were kept. Eloan had learned much from the Seekers, the guardians of the hollow who had been entrusted with its secrets for centuries. They had shown her the way, but now, it was up to her to continue the journey. To protect the hollow. To understand its true power. And to face the darkness that was already stirring beneath the surface. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared in the sky, Eloan stood at the edge of the garden, staring into the distance. The hollow was quiet, but she could feel the tension in the air, the quiet before the storm. "The time has come," a voice called from behind her. Eloan turned to find Narrated standing in the shadow of a tall oak tree, her eyes watching her with a quiet intensity. Eloan's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with curiosity. Narrated stepped forward, her presence as calming as the night air itself. "The hollow is calling you deeper now, Eloan. The trials you have faced so far have been only the beginning. The darkness that seeks to claim the hollow is still out there. It is not gone. And now, it is time for you to truly understand the power of the garden and what you must do to protect it." Eloan felt a shiver run through her. "What do I need to do?" she asked. Narrated looked at her, her expression unreadable. "There is a place beyond the garden, Eloan. A place where the hollow's heart was born. It is the source of all its power, and it is the key to everything. You must go there. But be warned, this place is not just a physical location. It is a realm of memories and shadows, a place where the veil between the past and the present is thin. You will face more than just the darkness outside. You will face your own fears, your own regrets, your own desires." Eloan swallowed hard. "I'm ready," she said, though a part of her was uncertain. She had already faced so much, but this felt different. The hollow was a place of great power, yes, but also great danger. She wasn't sure what to expect. Narrated nodded. "The hollow is waiting for you," she said softly. "The path will be difficult. But you must trust yourself. Trust the garden. It will show you the way." Eloan nodded, though her heart was heavy. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said. Narrated gave her a small smile. "I know you will." With that, Narrated stepped back into the shadows of the trees, leaving Eloan alone with her thoughts. The air around her was thick with anticipation, the garden silent and still. It was as though the entire world was waiting for her to take the next step. Eloan took a deep breath and turned toward the darkening horizon. The garden stretched before her, but she knew that the true journey lay ahead. Beyond the garden. Beyond the hollow. She began walking, her steps steady and determined. The path before her seemed to shift, the familiar trees and vines giving way to something else, something older, more ancient. The air grew thicker, the ground softer, as if she were stepping into a different realm altogether. The hollow's power pulsed around her, guiding her forward, urging her to keep moving. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she knew one thing for certain: this was the final trial. The last step in her journey to become the true keeper of the hollow. As she walked, the world around her began to change. The trees became taller, their branches twisting and curling into strange shapes. The air was thick with fog, the ground slippery with dew. The hollow was no longer the peaceful, quiet place she had known. It had become something else, something darker, something more mysterious. She felt the hollow's presence around her, its energy swirling through the air. It was alive, watching her, waiting for her to take the next step. And then, ahead of her, she saw it, the entrance to a cave, its mouth dark and foreboding. The trees parted around it, and the air grew still. This was the place Narrated had spoken of, the place where the hollow's heart had been born. Eloan took another step forward, her heart racing in her chest. She had no idea what awaited her inside, but she knew that she had no choice but to go forward. As she stepped into the cave, the air grew colder, the walls slick with moisture. The darkness seemed to close in around her, but Eloan pressed on, her hand resting on the key at her side. The hollow was with her. She could feel it. The deeper she went, the more the air seemed to hum with energy. The walls of the cave were lined with glowing runes, symbols she didn't recognize. They seemed to pulse with life, glowing brighter the closer she got to the heart of the hollow. At the end of the cave, she found it, the source of the hollow's power. A massive stone altar, carved with symbols that matched the runes on the cave walls. The altar was bathed in a soft, golden light, and in its center lay a small, glowing crystal. It hummed with energy, its light pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Eloan stepped forward, her hand reaching out to touch the crystal. The moment her fingers made contact, the entire cave shook. The light of the crystal intensified, blinding her for a moment. The hollow's power surged through her, filling her with an overwhelming sense of energy and understanding. She gasped, her body shaking with the force of the power coursing through her. The garden, the hollow, it all flowed through her now. She was connected to it, one with it. The power of the garden was her power. And in that moment, Eloan understood. She was the keeper of the hollow, not just its protector, but its heart. And the hollow was her responsibility. But the darkness was still out there. And it would come for her. It would come for the hollow. But Eloan was ready. Eloan stood in the heart of the cave, her fingers still trembling against the crystal. The moment her skin made contact with the glowing stone, the world had shifted. She had felt the hollow's power surge through her like a torrent of energy, an ancient current that connected her to the earth itself, to the trees, to the very air she breathed. She was no longer just the keeper, she had become the hollow. The light of the crystal pulsed in time with her heartbeat, filling the cave with a blinding glow. Her vision blurred, and for a moment, she could not tell where the cave ended and she began. She was everywhere, and everywhere was within her. The garden's history, its memories, its power all flowed through her, and she understood it in a way that defied logic. She saw the faces of the hollow's past keepers, each one a part of the garden's legacy. She saw the first stone placed, the first seed sown, the first breath of life that had awakened within the hollow. But as the light of the crystal grew brighter, a shadow began to stir in the corners of her mind. The hollow's power was not without its price. The force of the crystal's energy was overwhelming. Eloan felt herself being pulled, stretched thin by the weight of it all. The hollow had shown her the beauty, the peace, the life within its boundaries. But now, she felt its darker side, its fragility. She saw the cracks in the garden's foundation, the ancient wounds that had never fully healed. She saw the darkness that had always lingered just beyond the edges of the hollow, waiting for its moment to strike. And now, that moment had come. The earth beneath her feet trembled. Eloan stepped back, her heart pounding. The crystal's light flickered, and the cave around her seemed to warp and shift, the walls closing in as the darkness began to rise. She could hear it, the soft whisper of something ancient, something powerful, something that had been lying dormant for centuries. The hollow had protected her, had shown her the truth, but now, the hollow itself was under threat. The darkness was coming for the heartstone. A low rumble echoed through the cave as the walls began to crack, the earth splitting beneath her feet. The crystal pulsed again, its light flickering erratically as the power inside it began to wane. "You cannot protect it forever," a voice echoed through the cave, deep and resonant. Eloan spun, her heart racing, but there was no one there. The voice came from everywhere, from the walls, from the air itself. "The hollow belongs to me." The ground trembled again, and Eloan's gaze shot to the crystal. It was fading, its glow weakening as the power that sustained it began to slip away. Her connection to the hollow, the connection she had felt so strongly moments before, began to fray, like a thread unraveling before her eyes. "You think you can stop me?" the voice mocked. "The hollow is mine. And you will never be strong enough to protect it? You are nothing but a child, playing at being a keeper. The garden is weak. And so are you." The shadows around her deepened, the air growing cold and thick with the weight of the words. Eloan could feel the presence of something ancient, something far more dangerous than the creature she had sealed away. This wasn't just an enemy, it was the darkness within the hollow itself. The very thing that threatened to tear it apart. She clenched her fists, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. She was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the hollow, for its heart, for everything it had given her. She wasn't just a keeper. She was the garden's last line of defense. With a determined breath, Eloan reached out and grasped the crystal again, her fingers trembling as they wrapped around its smooth surface. She could feel its power surging through her, but it was weakening, flickering like a candle in the wind. The darkness was closing in, and she was running out of time. "I will not let you take it," she whispered fiercely, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. The cave seemed to shake with the force of her words. The darkness roared in response, the shadows swirling violently around her. The crystal flickered again, its light dimming as the energy within it began to fade. Eloan's heart pounded, the weight of the garden's power pressing down on her. She knew what she had to do. With every ounce of strength she could muster, Eloan pushed her own energy into the crystal, feeding it with her own essence, her own connection to the hollow. She poured her heart into the stone, willing it to remain alive, to stay strong, to protect the garden and its power. For a moment, the darkness receded. The crystal flared with light, its energy surging once more. The earth beneath her feet stopped trembling, and the shadows retreated. The walls of the cave, once cracking and breaking, began to heal, the cracks closing as the hollow's power surged back to life. Eloan's vision blurred as the energy overwhelmed her. She felt herself being pulled into the light, her body light as air, her mind consumed by the force of the hollow's power. She was no longer just a keeper. She was the hollow. And then, just as suddenly, it all stopped. The cave was silent once more. The crystal's glow had steadied, its light now strong and constant. The earth beneath her feet was solid again, the cracks mended, the shadows gone. But Eloan knew it wasn't over. The battle had only just begun. She staggered back, her body weak from the strain, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The connection to the hollow was stronger than ever, but she could feel the weight of the trials ahead. The hollow was a living, breathing entity, and its power was both a gift and a curse. She had been chosen to protect it, to safeguard its heart, but the darkness was still out there, waiting to return. And this time, she would not be alone. The garden had fallen silent once more, but the weight of the trials still hung in the air, thick and heavy, like the stillness before a storm. Eloan stood in the center of the cave, the crystal pulsing steadily in her hand. She could feel the energy of the hollow coursing through her veins, a power she had only begun to understand. The connection between her and the garden was stronger than ever, but so was the danger. The darkness had been held back, but it was not gone. She knew it would return. The hollow had been shaken, but it would not fall. Not while she was its keeper. With a deep breath, Eloan stepped away from the heart stone, her mind racing with thoughts of the next step. She couldn't do this alone. She needed help. She needed allies. The hollow's power was vast, but it was fragile. And the darkness that threatened it was cunning, patient, and relentless. It was time to seek out those who could stand with her. Eloan turned and walked out of the cave, the air growing warmer as she stepped back into the garden. The trees seemed to watch her, their branches swaying gently in the wind. She could feel the garden's energy shifting, as though it, too, was waiting for something. For someone. The path ahead seemed clearer now. The way forward was no longer just about survival. It was about unity. The Hollow needed more than just a keeper. It needed a gathering, a coalition of those who could protect it from the coming storm. She knew she had to find them. The Seekers had spoken of others, those who had guarded the Hollow's secrets for centuries. The time had come to seek them out. The first stop was the Heartstone's hidden grove, the place where the crystal had first been awakened. Eloan had been there before, but now, it felt different. The air was charged, heavy with the weight of the power she had unlocked. The trees were no longer just trees, they were guardians, their branches reaching toward the sky like ancient sentinels. The ground beneath her feet felt solid, but there was an undercurrent of tension in the earth. The garden was waiting, but it was also vulnerable. As she approached the stone altar, she felt a subtle shift in the air, like a presence waiting just out of sight. And then, she heard the faint sound of footsteps behind her. She turned sharply, her hand instinctively reaching for the key at her side. But when she saw the figure approaching, her breath caught in her throat. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his face obscured by the shadows of the trees. He was dressed in simple robes, his cloak billowing slightly in the wind. But there was something about him, something familiar, yet unfamiliar, that made her hesitate. He had the look of someone who had spent a lifetime wandering the edges of the world, someone who had seen things most would never understand. His eyes were the first thing she noticed, piercing, like the cold blue of a winter sky. They locked with hers, and for a moment, Eloan felt as though he were seeing straight into her soul. "I've been waiting for you," the man said, his voice deep and gravelly, but with a softness that made her feel at ease. Eloan's heart raced. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the unexpected encounter. The man smiled, a small, knowing smile that sent a shiver down her spine. "I am what you seek," he said. "I am one of the guardians, one of the seekers who has watched over the Hollow. But I am not here by chance. I was called, just as you were." Eloan's mind raced. "You were called? By the Hollow?" The man nodded. "Yes. The Hollow has always known its keepers, its guardians, its protectors. But it also knows when the time comes to call for help. You are the keeper, Eloan, but you cannot protect it alone. There are others, those who have walked these paths before you. We are here to guide you, to stand with you." Eloan took a step forward, her heart beating faster. "I need your help," she said, her voice filled with determination. "The Hollow is in danger. The darkness will return, and I can't stop it by myself." The man nodded again, his gaze softening. "I know," he said. "And you will not face it alone. The time has come for us to gather. The Hollow's power is vast, but it is also fragile. We are its guardians, and we will fight with you to protect it." Eloan felt a surge of relief. but also a sense of urgency. Where do we begin? The man smiled again, this time with more warmth. We begin with trust, Eloan. The Hollow has chosen you. It has called you, and now you must call upon those who are meant to stand with you. The seekers, the guardians, they are waiting. The garden has always known them, and they have always known it. Eloan nodded, feeling the weight of the decision settling in her chest. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady. I will do whatever it takes. The man stepped forward, his hand outstretched. Then take my hand, and let us walk together. The garden will show you the way. Eloan hesitated for a moment, but then she reached out, taking his hand. The moment their fingers touched, a surge of energy pulsed through her, and she felt a deep connection to the garden, to the hollow, to everything that had led her to this point. The air around them seemed to shimmer, and the world around her shifted. The garden was no longer just a place. It was a living entity, a force of nature that had shaped her, that had shaped them all. And now, with the help of the guardians, Eloan would protect it, no matter the cost. Eloan stood at the edge of the hollow, the night sky above her alight with stars. She could feel the presence of her allies, the seekers gathering around her, their energy melding with hers, creating a force stronger than any she had known before. The hollow had called them, and now, they were ready to stand together against the darkness that threatened everything they held dear. The ground beneath her feet pulsed with the power of the hollow, the garden alive with energy. The trees, the flowers, the very earth seemed to breathe with anticipation. The battle was coming. The forces that sought to claim the hollow's heart were gathering, and Eloan knew that the time to act had arrived. She turned toward her allies, the guardians of the hollow who had walked these paths before her. There were others now, 2 new faces who had come in response to the hollow's call. Together, they made a circle around her, their eyes filled with determination and resolve. They were ready. The hollow has shown us the way, the man she had met earlier said, his voice steady and strong. It has chosen us to protect its heart, to stand against the darkness that seeks to destroy it. We are its last line of defense, and we will fight with everything we have. Eloan nodded, her heart swelling with pride. We fight for the garden. For the hollow. For everything it represents. We fight together. The air around them seemed to hum with energy, and the ground beneath them trembled as the garden itself prepared for the coming battle. The hollow was more than just a place. It was a living, breathing entity, and it was calling them all to defend it. The moon hung high in the sky, casting its pale light over the garden as Eloan and her allies stood together, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Suddenly, the ground cracked beneath their feet, and from the fissure, dark shadows began to rise. The air grew thick with the scent of decay, and the trees seemed to recoil, their leaves curling in fear. The darkness had come. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, cloaked figure, its face obscured by a dark hood. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and the very air around it seemed to warp with malevolent energy. "The hollow is mine," the figure said, its voice deep and chilling. "You cannot protect it? The heart stone belongs to me, and I will take it?" Eloan's heart raced, but she stood her ground. "You will not have it?" Her voice was firm, her hand resting on the silver key at her side. "The hollow belongs to the earth. To the garden. You cannot control it." The figure laughed, a cold, mocking sound that echoed through the garden. "You think you can stop me? I have waited centuries for this moment. The hollow is weak. And you are nothing but a child, pretending to be its guardian." With a swift motion, the figure raised its hand, and dark energy shot out from its fingertips, striking the ground with a thunderous crack. The earth shook, and Eloan felt the hollow's power tremble beneath her feet. But she was not alone. The seekers stepped forward, their hands raised, calling on the power of the hollow. The earth beneath them surged with energy as the garden itself responded to their call. The trees bent toward them, their branches reaching like arms to shield them from the darkness. The vines grew thick and strong, wrapping around the dark figure, holding it in place. "We will not let you take it," Eloan said, her voice unwavering. "The hollow is not yours to control. It is mine. And it is ours to protect." The figure snarled, struggling against the vines that held it, but the more it fought, the stronger the hollow's power grew. The garden was alive, its energy surging through Eloan and her allies, filling them with strength and purpose. With a final, determined effort, Eloan raised the silver key high, its light glowing bright in the darkness. The hollow's energy flowed through her, and she knew, in that moment, that she was not just a keeper. She was the hollow. With a surge of power, Eloan thrust the key into the ground, and the earth trembled beneath her. The hollow's power surged, breaking through the darkness, sending it retreating back into the shadows. The figure screamed, its form dissolving into nothingness as the garden's light enveloped it. The air grew still once more, the darkness vanquished, and the garden was safe. Eloan fell to her knees, exhausted, but triumphant. She had protected the hollow. She had faced the darkness and won. The hollow's heart was safe, and its power was hers to protect. Her allies surrounded her, their faces filled with pride and relief. The garden, once again, had been saved. The battle was over, but the journey was not. Eloan stood at the edge of the hollow, the garden now calm and peaceful once more. The trees swayed gently in the wind, the flowers bloomed brightly in the sun, and the earth beneath her feet hummed with life. But she knew that the hollow's protection was not a one-time battle. It was a constant responsibility, a duty she had sworn to uphold. She was the keeper now, not just in name, but in essence. The hollow was hers to protect, to nurture, and to defend. The seekers stood beside her, their faces filled with respect and admiration. They had fought beside her, but now it was her turn to guide them, to lead them as they had once led her. Eloan took a deep breath and smiled. The hollow was safe, but it would always be in need of protection. The darkness had been driven back, but it would return. And when it did, Eloan would be ready. She turned to her allies, her heart full of gratitude. Together, she said, her voice steady and filled with purpose. We will protect this garden. Together, we will keep the hollow safe. We are its guardians. And with that, Eloan, the keeper of the hollow, stood tall, her heart united with the garden, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.